So after living in Mexico and growing up there, my next journey as a linguist was to go to Willamette University, which is in Oregon, in Salem, Oregon. It's just about 1 hour south of Portland, Oregon. And it was very fun. I loved living in Oregon. It was a beautiful time of my life. Oregon is very rainy. It's like right now they're having some of the most strongest rain that they've had in, decades and decades. So this was very conducive to studying. So I spent a lot of time looking at my books and practicing my studies with my friends. Now, I wanted to study linguistics because that was my interest. It always has been. But this school didn't have a linguistics program. What they had was a scholarship that they gave me. They said, please come study here and we will give you some money. And so I went there on a scholarship and I said, okay, if I cannot study linguistics, what can I do? I will study something very different. We'll study a very different language. And so I started taking Japanese language classes. I thought that I can, by studying a language very different than mine, that I can absorb linguistics. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, but very fortunately, what came from this interest was a very strong and beautiful relationship with the country of Japan. I was able to learn Japanese language, and to a pretty decent degree. I am able to speak it somewhat fluently now, and I really do appreciate that experience. I was very happy to be able to do that. We had great teachers there. We did have, because our students were interested, we begged our professors. We said, please give us a linguistics class. So our wonderful professor, Miho Fujiwara, she put together an intro to linguistics, a linguistics 101 class, as a bit of an experiment for our students. And so I was able to take that class, and it was very interesting and beautiful. I discovered that linguistics was much harder than I imagined. I think I actually almost failed the class, even though I really wanted to do it. And the reason was that, it is hard, actually. Linguistics is a little bit difficult, and was taking too many classes at that time. I think the thing that was most difficult for me was writing syntax trees. If you remember how when we write out a sentence, we have to split it into, subject and predicate, and then, a subject and object, and then the verb, and then the object of the verb, and then, like adjectives that can modify nouns, and all of that part can be a little bit difficult, right? And so I wasn't prepared for how hard that could be. But it was very fun, and it actually did stoke my interest in linguistics, and it allowed me to continue. So some of the things that I did at university that helped me become a linguistic professional was that I had the opportunity to work part-time as a student. And so I worked at something called the LLC, the Language Learning Center. I would work, I believe, about 6 hours a week, preparing materials for the language classes. Maybe the teachers needed handouts, maybe they needed a presentation about a topic in a language, and so I would help them do that. And that is what helped me start to understand what it's like to work for a in a linguistic context for language classes. It's one thing to take a language class, that's fun, but it's a very different one to prepare it, right? And how to put it together. How do you teach somebody a language? And that was one of the things that I learned there. Another thing that I did that helped me become a linguistic professional later was that I volunteered in something called the JSSL. And I did the wrong thing. I didn't expand the acronym here, but JSSL means Japan Studies Student Leaders. And so what we did there was we would, ask the university for money so that we can buy calligraphy pens and brushes so that we can practice shodo, which is what we call Japanese calligraphy. And we would do different practices to practice different cultural techniques and habits and hobbies that would help us understand our studies a little bit better. And in the end, as you know now, as Chigusa mentioned, I am now a computational linguist, which you sometimes also call a language engineer. And I began doing that a little bit by taking some intro to programming classes. At that time, I had no idea that I would be able to join linguistics with computation together. It was just you needed some requirements, some technical units so that I could graduate from my program. So I went ahead and took these. But actually, this turned out to be very, very helpful. So after studying there, I ended up having the opportunity to study abroad in Japan. And then after studying abroad in Japan, after university, I was able to work at the same university where I studied abroad as an exchange student. So I got the experience of living with a host family in Japan, taking classes in Japanese in Japan in a city called Kawagoe. And Kawagoe, maybe Chigusa, you are familiar, as a small little town just northwest of Tokyo. It is what they call a commuter town for Tokyo. So many people live in Kawagoe and then take the train or drive into Tokyo to work. And that was an excellent experience. So after the 4 years of university, where I studied Japanese, I got an opportunity to live and work in Japan for 4 years. And that is where my Japanese language truly became strong. I was working as a university administrator in a school called Tokyo International University. And what we did there as the Japan Studies Program coordinator was welcoming exchange students from all over the world to come to our campus. We would put them with host families so that they could practice Japanese at home and also take classes in Japanese. And my job there was just to coordinate everything, like hire the professors, make sure that everything is going good with the evaluations, making sure that the students are happy, and of course, in a program like this, with about 30 students in the program at a semester, there's all sorts of things that can happen. Studying abroad in a different culture, especially for the first time, if you've never been to a new country, it can be very challenging. It can be very stressful. It can be exhausting even in many different ways. Of course, many of your students, many of you guys have heard of and are experiencing, I'm sure, in various different ways, the reality of culture shock. When you move to another country to study, culture shock can be a very strong, difficult experience. And some of us can just give up and say, okay, enough, I want to go back home. So my job was also to help people, all of my students to be strong and not give up, and give them different little tips and strategies to combat this culture shock. And then the culture shock is a bit of a wave. First, you arrive to a country, you have a wonderful experience, it's called the honeymoon period, and then you have a difficult time, which is called the adjustment period, and then at the end you have a balance period where you come to terms with all of the wonderful different things as well as the difficult things of your new country, right? And so that was my work there, and it was very, very fun. This is what really allowed me to understand more about how to administer a university program. As Chigusa and Marina know very well, this is a difficult thing to do. It seems easy, you just, have your office and you just say hello every day. But the reality is that there's a lot of work and lots of challenges to running a program like this, right? So that was very helpful for me to understand in this experience. After that, I was able to actually move back to Oregon. I went back to Willamette University where I was a student, and I worked as a student activities coordinator. And so it was basically the same thing I was doing in Japan, but now welcoming Japanese students to America. This was basically the same thing. It was super fun back in Oregon, beautiful Oregon with all of the trees and the flowers and, you know, the rainy winters, which can be cold sometimes, but this really was a lot of fun. And here in the photograph, you can see me with my colleagues at this program called Tokyo International University of America. We had a program there called the ASP, the American Studies Program. And while I was there, I was able to help them open up furthermore, and we started to getting more students, not just from Japan, but also from China, from Korea, mostly students from Asia were joining us in this program. And it was very, very fun. I got to practice Japanese a lot at that time.